Welcome to the first episode of Rebuilding the Palisades podcast. I'm Zach Fagan, and we're here with master luxury home builder Mauricio Oberfeld, principal of Dugally Oberfeld. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Just tell us briefly, how did you get into the business? How did you get into construction to start with?
Big mistake. um, I went to school to study architecture. I went to USC, and I decided pretty early on that I did not want to be an architect, but I wanted to be in construction and in development. So I went into real estate development, and I had met Matt Dugally, my partner, at college. Our fathers were friends. We're doing business together, and it just kind of naturally happened. I started developing. And soon after, Matt was already in business with his dad, and we decided to put this together and do a construction and development company. So, 1998, we founded the company.
Very cool. You've built some extremely iconic luxury homes in Los Angeles. Is there a particular project that stands out as, a defining moment in your career?
There are, I think, three projects that I consider pivotal in our career. One of them was one of the earlier, bigger spec houses we did. All three were spec projects, and the reason that these were pivotal is because when you're doing a project, and I hate the word spec makes it feel cheap somehow.
Sure.
But the way that we approach spec, and the way I always did it, was to go do the most luxury, the best. Not cutting corners, but doing something that when a buyer comes to buy, that you'd be proud of. And part of the reason I wanted to partner with Matt and Alec was also because I thought it was important to control the construction side of it in order to have the quality. So each of these three projects were where we were really in charge and in control in how we built them. And I think each of them really kind of changed the industry. I'll talk about one, which is very near and dear to my heart. It's my own house, which you guys did. But the reason that I think was a pivotal project is I took the risk of doing a super modern house. Zoltan Pali was the architect at a time when it really wasn't the case. People were starting to build modern, but not at that level. And I wanted to do something that was going to be modern, but not what they were doing at the time. Not kitsch, and not something that was going to be out of style in 10 years, which, by the way, we're seeing now how all those moderns that were built in 09, 010, 11, they're kind of going out of style. And so we really set out to do kind of a modernist revival, and a house that was really more of a mid-century inspired, with proportions of what, of today, not just proportions, materials, technologies, everything. And I wanted that house to be timeless, and that 50 years later, it would look like what you see these, great mid-century houses that 50, 60, 70 years later look amazing. And I think the reason that, to me, that project was pivotal is everything up to that point for our company had been building mostly traditional homes. At the time we were doing Italian palazzos and French mansions, and this house got so much attention. We had several AIA home tours. We had so many people tour through it. Also, I was available to do that. When you have a client house, you can't really be trekking 500 people through it. But it kind of changed the industry. From that moment on, I think a lot of things changed. People wanted to copy that, or at least be inspired by that. And certainly for our company, it was pivotal because all of a sudden everybody wanted us to build their modern homes. Not a lot of people were building modern, and certainly not at that quality or at that level. And a warm modern was like unseen.
Right.
So it was pretty pivotal. And after that, I don't know the percentage, but most of what we've done in the last 15 years has been modern because of that.
Right. Very similar.
Yeah.
Lots of glass, lots of concrete.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Lots of glass, steel, and concrete, and yet it's warm.
Right.
And people walk in like, how did you manage this, right? Another project that we did that was very similar was the Robert Lane project. And same thing. People walked in, everything was wood ceilings, wood floors, wood walls. Even the stone felt like wood and very warm. So the trick of how to get a house to be super warm and cozy while it's still modern and glass and steel and concrete.
Yeah, interesting. That is definitely a challenge. Kudos for pulling that off. We recently collaborated with your company on the TTO Andell project. How did you initially get involved with that job?
Um, I don't remember how we got involved, to be honest with you. I believe it was through the architect of record, Boshi Architects. Um, they had a relationship with Evan Robertson, who's our director of construction. I believe that's how we got to Lorenzo Hadar, who's the owner. And we met. He was already under construction, was not having a very good time doing it, and was having issues. And we stepped in, and then we took the project through completion.
What was there any specific component of that build that stuck out to you as kind of uniquely interesting?
Well, look, a Nando project is going to be all about concrete, concrete, concrete.
Right.
And it really, that was one of the things that we stepped in. There was a lot of, there were some issues with the concrete that had been poured up to that time. We knew we could fix it. Concrete is a very unpredictable material to work with. You know, it depends so much on the temperature outside, the humidity, how fast it dries. If you have a cold joint, how does that work? So the challenge of, if you are familiar with Ando, and I was in Japan and looked at so many of his projects, and I wanted to really get a feel for it. Went to Naoshima, the art island, where it's mostly his projects. You would think that his concrete is perfect, and it's not. You know, the concrete, especially when it's been there for a while, has a patina and you can see the swirls, and you can see the cold joints, and you can see that concrete's not perfect. And if you pour it perfect, it almost looks plastic.
Right.
So there are a lot of photography that you can see of Ando's projects that look like it's perfect. If you go to Paris and you see some of the work he's done, it looks pretty perfect. But not all of it is that way. And so the challenge was finding that balance. We had a great concrete contractor, but they had issues. You know, sometimes it was too hot, and as fast as they could pour, it's just drying on them. You're trying to, mix it and get it done quickly and vibrate it, and it just dries up on you. So the challenging part, the interesting part, the difficult part, all of it is that when it's done and you pour it and then you remove the forms and you look at it, the client was freaking out over some of the areas, and we kept telling him, look, wait for it to dry. Concrete takes a long time to dry. And if you don't like it, it's easy enough to fix. It's one of the things that there are these masters that can go in and fix the concrete, and they can make it look perfect if you want. So the challenge of how much of it do you want to fix, how much you don't want to fix, is a client going to accept it? Is he okay with the swirl marks? That to me are beautiful, right? At the end of the day, it was a lot of stress, and a lot of stress for the client, which I feel bad about, but we were able to satisfy that, hey, he wanted more clean, so we were able to do that. You have 10 clients that would all look at it 10 different ways.
10 different ways.
And that's kind of the beauty. This is a material, it's not like a stone that you come out of the ground and it's going to do what it's going to do. You are producing it, but you are creating a work of art. You're creating almost a stone-like material that's going to have a very distinct identity.
Sure.
So matching that, what the architect wants, what Ando wants, what the client wants, and sometimes it's not the same.
Yeah, that's a delicate balance.
It is.
On all projects.
It is.
Interesting. Isn't it also true that concrete never completely dries? It never dries 100%. Something like that, right?
It depends who you ask. I think they say it takes 50 years
50 years
to dry to 99%.
Right.
But the reality is, 28 days is the test of time. After 28 days, it's cured to a satisfactory level. But certainly it'll continue to have moisture for a long time. And by the time it really dries, it's already starting to get the elements into it, right? Sure. You got rain and you got dust and you got sun, and that's going to bake into it. And so that will also patina. That's the other thing, too, is you can make it perfect if it's exterior. It's not going to be perfect for a long time.
Right. Yeah, indeed. What is the absolute best client experience that you ever had?
That is a tough one. Building my house for my wife. That was my best client. If she's watching, I guarantee that's the best one.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been so many. Hard to say which is the best one. We've had some amazing clients. We've had some very difficult clients. It's a mixed bag. But I like to find always the best in each of them. I know that's kind of a cop out. Like, I'm not going to play favorites here, but there's projects that stick in my head as the best projects. And then, of course, you continue in your career, and what you thought was the best 5 years ago, now you do a new one that's the best again.
Sure.
But there are clients that we remain friends for years. There are clients that surprise you, that they're just so hard during the construction, and they're so tough on you, and you think you're just going to end up hating each other. And then once it's done, they love their house. They're super thankful, and they're great. Off the top of my head, I wouldn't want to point one to be the greatest, because I'm going to get a lot of crap from the others. But there are a lot, and I do have to say that in my own house, my wife was the best client, because she completely stayed out. I was able to create what I wanted with no interference, and there was actually an article written about the house afterwards, that the caption said something like, after years of building the most amazing homes for the most amazing clients, Mauricio Oberfeld finally met his match himself, right? I was the toughest client to myself, and toughest critic, and it was really very difficult. Anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent.
No, I totally understand. I've done a lot of work over the years for a lot of people, and when I do that same type of work for myself, I find myself in the same kind of spot where I'm very hard on myself, for obvious reasons. The other side of that coin, in case you didn't see this one coming, what's the worst experience you ever had with a customer?
I won't tell you the worst, because then I'll get slapped with a lawsuit. But
No
I'll
names.
tell you what
Definitely not.
is the hardest for us, and there have been a couple. We're in one, but the hardest way to build is a client that wants to be so involved that they're there daily. We've had a couple.
Looking over your shoulder.
Yeah, it's very hard. First of all, very hard to see progress when you're there every day. So you go there and Monday, and every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're like, no progress, But then they go on vacation. They come back 3 weeks later, like, now I see progress.
Right.
What, do I have to leave to see progress? No, you just have to, not come for a few days or a few weeks, come back, and there is progress. It also makes it very challenging. You have a team that, when you have somebody looking over their shoulder, and of course they're vested, it's hard to say no, they just don't perform in the same level. It's very hard. Anything you do, imagine you're in any sport or anything you do, you have somebody looking over your shoulder all the time. It's not a comfortable place to be. It doesn't allow you to really do your job.
Right.
So I'd say the worst has been, in my head, I have a handful, but that are there every day. It makes it really difficult. I could tell you in each of their cases, if the client would have said up front, oh, I'm going to be there every day, we'd say, thank you, we're not the right fit. It's just too difficult.
Sure. Yeah, there's enough cooks in the kitchen, as it were, to have the head chef there constantly kind of, looking over your shoulder. I totally get it. So as far as requests, we in the construction business generally, we get a lot of kind of wild requests, right? There are customers that come along and ask us to do wild things that maybe we've never done before, or that are clearly going to be very, difficult. In your experience, what is, one of the most outlandish requests or, expectations that a customer ever put on you?
Well, the most common and outlandish and difficult and hard to control is when they ask you to do something that's illegal. Right?
Oh.
And by illegal, I don't mean like where I'm going to go to jail, but where it's completely against code.
Sure.
And we are very protective of our license, especially nowadays. You've seen people take advantage of that. And so a client will be like, "Oh, no one's watching. No one's going to know. Just do this for me." Um, and we have to say no. And it's a really tough place. You always have what you call day two work. Sometimes afterwards, come back and clear in some things. We'll usually say, you take care of it. You have somebody do it. We're out of that. But we have had some requests of doing some pretty crazy changes um, that would be really bad for us if an inspector were to catch us. That we have to say no, and a lot of times it drives a wedge with the clients. It's not often, but I think those are the most outlandish requests we get, are things like that, because they know they can't do it.
Yeah. No, and even if something would, no one was around and a thing got done, the inspector's going to come back eventually. And they're not stupid. They're going to look and say, "Well, how did that wait, there's no free lunch. There's no getting around that." So,
No.
it's very smart to stay away from those kinds of requests.
Yeah.
Because they know that there's dollar signs attached, right, to everything, every decision, everything that gets done. There's a dollar sign on it, right? There's a lift, and we also see customers that want to, cut corners on things, and it's like, no, it's really not a good idea.
Yeah, it's for us, it's our reputation. We've worked really
Absolutely.
hard for 30 years or so to build an amazing reputation that isn't just in the community, it's also with the city. So inspectors know who we are.
That's right.
Now the heads of the departments are the inspectors that used to be on the field, and they're the ones that got to inspect us, and they know. So if I have a problem, I call the head. They know who we are.
Sure.
If I was letting our teams do things that were not good, then that would go away very quickly, and then so would our reputation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. So, obviously, the beginning of this year, we had one of the worst disasters ever in LA history. What are some key challenges that you think you're going to face when, rebuilding after a fire? The Palisades, for example, is thousands of homes there, and they're doing the remediation now. There's lots of trucks going in and out, but it's going to be a decade or more of construction in that area. Just talk to us a little bit about what some of those challenges are inevitably going to be.
It's tough to put into a quick answer. We've been dealing with this, and I'm a part of several groups that are dealing with how to make this work. And we've had dozens and dozens of meetings and time spent. So it's such a big challenge that you can talk about so many aspects of it. Obviously, the most common challenges people think is going to be, well, how are you going to get labor and materials for that many homes? And materials aren't necessarily the biggest deal. You have Palisades is about 9,000 structures, Altadena another 9,000. The staggering thing about it is the square footage of it. You have 23 million square feet to rebuild. So if you start thinking about what that means, it's something we've never been challenged with. So it will be very hard to get labor, no doubt. Materials, if you think about it, you're buying tile and you're buying from 100 different companies. That's nothing, nationally, internationally. So we're not going to have a challenge of getting materials. It's going to be labor. Everybody knows it. Everybody's preparing for it. We are already pretty saturated, even before rebuilding anything. The challenges that keep me up at night, and I don't have the solution for, and there are groups working on this, but including Rick Caruso's, and ULI has a group that's very actively, is like you said, the logistics, the infrastructure. So imagine you have 9,000 homes to rebuild over a decade. You're talking 900 homes a year, and it's going to start slower, and then it's going to speed up, right? And then at the end, it's going to be much less. So there will be a period of time you'll have probably 2,000 homes per year, which means 4,000, 5,000, 3,000 going at any single time. How are you going to get trucks in and out for that many homes? How are you going to direct traffic for that? How are you going to do export, right? How are you going to get staging? So these things are the things that people are thinking about. There are some really important people in the community that are actively thinking about it, but nobody really knows yet how it's going to pan out. There are so many people that We don't know if they'll ever rebuild. A lot of people already left, said goodbye. They're selling and they don't care what they get. They're done. Others have relocated temporarily and waiting to see if they ever come back. So there's a lot of data we don't know, but there's also a lot of data we do know. This group that I'm referencing that put together a very important study looking at other fires and what happened after the rebuild process, what happened to property values, how quickly they started building, how quickly they got back up. Some fires never did. The Paradise Fire, I think it's called the Paradise Fire, they never did. If you look at what's there's nothing. Others, like I think it was Napa or one around Napa, there was a big fire. Properties went down, they started rebuilding pretty quickly, and they got back pretty quickly. That's the expectation here. There is so much help, not just financially, but people like Rick Caruso and the universities. I'm on the board of the USC School of Architecture. The dean is very vested in this. So is the real estate school, as well as UCLA Real Estate School. We're very active in how we're going to make this work. And there's a lot of help coming to people to incentivize them to get back and build quickly. The quicker that you see people start to build, the easier it's going to be, because nobody wants to be the first back in a neighborhood. The Alphabet Streets lost 1,300 homes, I believe. Would you want to be the first one there? Certainly not until you have some critical mass. So that's going to take people to say, okay, let's all jump on this. Let's start building 300 homes at a time there. So that's 300 homeowners that have to agree to do it. This is not going to be developed by a developer. They're all individually owned. So, but there is a lot of help happening, and you're going to start seeing that come up very, very quickly here.
So from a manpower perspective, I grew up in the South where we have, hurricanes practically every year come through and wipe out, the beach towns, and they just keep rebuilding right back on the beach over and over again, and they don't build concrete structures that are more resilient. They seem to just never learn. But with regard to manpower, there are always people that come to the state from all over who are unlicensed, who are, up to no good, as it were. Do you worry, and are there conversations or safeguards maybe going into place to protect against unsavory, individuals, fly-by-night, general contractors that are going to try and come in and fill that void?
You have so many stories that are going to come out of this. So you're going to have those. I don't see a way around it. But you're going to have also the opposite. There is a group put together by, I'm involved in it, Jason and Stephen Summers of Crest Real Estate put together this group called LA Case Study 2.0. The purpose of the group is precisely to avoid that, is so that there are 40 architects involved. They're all designing plans that will be accessible to anybody that wants them. And each plan is going to be paired up with a builder, and each builder will have the subcontractors and the team. And the idea is that any homeowner can take that plan, they can tweak it so it's kind of individualized and build it. It'll be permitted, ready to go. If you're a homeowner, you can actually just buy that plan and start building almost immediately. And you'll have the pricing, because let's say that I'm the contractor for one of these plans, and I know I'm going to build somewhere between 10 to 25 of the same cut and paste. You could change some of the materials, some of the colors, landscaping, et cetera, so each of them are individualized, but structurally it's the same thing. It allows us to control costs. It allows us to really max out labor. So, for example, I'm going to have a really hard time getting a plumber to come into a small job for half day and then leave. But if I have 15 of them, now I can have the plumber go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, doing exactly the same thing on all of them, right? Same thing with all of the other trades. There will be opportunities for bulk discounts, for sure, from the construction side, from the material side. There's a lot of sponsorship opportunities. We already have a number of companies like Fleetwood, for example, is coming in saying, okay, these lines will be available to you at a discount. If you do this across the board through a lot of the material suppliers and with the labor, you're going to have a tremendous amount of savings. So there is a lot of help that is being put together specifically to avoid that, right? Now, out of state is actually one of the key components of it. We don't have enough labor here to do this. So we will be importing. There's no question.
Sure.
So then it brings up, okay, where are you going to lodge them? How are you going to put them? But there are, there's always these opportunities when obviously it in hurricane areas, it always happens. And so you import labor, not fly by nights, but you import people that you vet. They're good. You bring them in. There's plumbers everywhere. You know how many workers are in Austin, for example, that right now are looking for work because they overbuilt. Same thing in Miami. So it's these are booming areas, but construction slowed way down. A lot of people moved there to work, and now they're running out of work. So it gives us an opportunity to bring them in here.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. How do you navigate the process of obtaining permits and approvals for fire-resistant building practices? I know that it's changing to the extent that the code will be a bit different moving forward. Probably, I would imagine you can speak to that, but just speak to that point a little bit about fire-resistant materials and practices in this new phase that we find ourselves in.
We call it hardened construction, right? So I don't know that they're going to change any codes for it. I think that's going to be more individual. But we already have most of the new homes we do are hardened. We haven't used some of the materials that are flammable for years, like wood roof tiles, right? Any wood roof. There are definitely things that we do in the homes today to prepare them for fire, like spraying them for fire retardant material. For fire, if we spray a fire retardant material so that the house cannot catch fire from inside. Most of the homes that you see that burn like this, they burn from the inside out. And the most common is because you have embers that are flying, and sometimes embers fly a mile or 2 miles.
End up in the eaves.
And they end up going through the vents, either tucked out under the eaves, in the vents, in the attics. That's the worst. They go in the attic, and you got insulation, you got wood, and the house catches fire from the inside. Then it starts going to the next one, to the next one. Now you have also radiant heat. So these houses are so tight together, the radiant heat starts really affecting, and so you have a daisy chain, and you have winds like we had that are tremendous. So the biggest, there's two things that you can do and that we are doing, and we have been now for a long time. One is use materials that are not flammable, of course. We really don't use a lot of attic vents anymore. You have different technologies that allow you not to have to vent the attic if you have an attic, and obviously roof tiles that are not flammable. You also have available these fire retardant, like roof sprinklers, and they're property sprinklers. There's also all different technologies coming out from companies that are putting together how to prepare a house for a fire. So if you know that there's a fire imminent, you'll turn on these sprinklers that go everywhere, and they have fire retardant material in it. There's fire suppression and fire retardant, both depending where you're at. So, I don't foresee the smaller houses putting some of the more expensive systems, but for sure building with hardened materials. If you look at a house that the exterior of the house is stucco and glass and steel and roof tiles, whatever material, but they're not flammable, what's going to catch fire from that house? It may be the trees, right? It may be the furniture, right? So things like that. Pool pumps is another one. I think that pool pumps should be universal. If you look at a fire like that, forget about the fact that there was no water. How much water can you get out of one hydrant when all the houses are burning? So when a firefighter goes into a house and sees a pool pump next to a pool, it's immediate grab it. The pool becomes a fire hydrant. So those are things that are musts. And so there's no construction we have in the hills where we're not doing something, not just on the hardening of the house, but on fire suppression as well.
Interesting. Yeah, those are all great, great points. So you covered LA case study. I'm interested to learn a lot more about what's going on there. How could our audience learn more about LA Case Study 2.0?
There's a website coming up. It should be live, I believe, tomorrow. Sorry, I got to look at. I'm pretty sure it's casestudy2.com.
Got it. Thank you for that. As far as general building techniques that can be utilized to make buildings more fire resistant, we talked about materials. Are there, any other topics or kind of areas where you could elaborate that might make houses more fire resistant? Maybe where they're built. I guess the Palisades is kind of not going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, we've built there before, so we're going to rebuild that area. But, staying away from areas, or maybe not further developing areas that are, prone to wildfire, et cetera. But are there any other points that you could make about what people can do moving forward to make their property more resilient, more hardened, as you described, and just generally more fire resistant?
Yeah. There's a lot of resources for that, and it's education, right? So you have an instinctive notion of how to do certain things already. I think we all do. I mean, when Sunset Fire erupted and it was heading towards our area, I didn't have a fire suppression system. My house is pretty hardened, but first thing I did is I turned on all the sprinklers and got the entire property wet, right? I think that there are things you are able to do as an individual, even if you don't have a fire sprinkler system in your house, by education. So if you're going to spray down your house, what are you going to spray? So if you have a house that's stucco, why are you spraying stucco, for example? You're just wasting water. There's nothing that is gonna light up. But if you, through education, there are a lot of programs, and depending on your budget, there are companies out there, some great companies that actually will come through, and they'll do an inspection of your home. I did it on mine, and give you a checklist: what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what is your danger zone, what is your firefighting area, where should you stand, and what you should do. If you have a pool pump, what is it? What do you use it? How do you use it for? How long of a hose do you need? Do you need one or two hoses? These are all things that are very easily available. There's a lot of videos if you just want to look at videos, but there's also a lot of people that are knowledgeable, a lot of companies that are just like security companies are off-duty. LAPD, for example, is the same on firefighting. They are retired firefighters. They are there to help. And if anybody's interested, feel free to contact me. I can connect them. But understanding how to prepare for it. So, as an example, I did the same on my house. Things that I would have never thought about. I have furniture outside and in a covered patio. It's like the worst thing you could do. That furniture is wood. It has pillows and cushions. It's going to catch fire very quickly. So if there is a fire coming, if you're lucky enough to know that or a fire danger, you move those things away. I'm in the process of buying big storage to get the pillows off so that they're not there. So it takes a lot longer. Wood doesn't just catch fire, it takes time. Pillows catch fire like that.
Sure.
So things like that you may not be aware, and what to do. You have a checklist in the case of fire. So if you need to get out, first of all, how do you prepare? If you have a pool pump, what do you spray? How do you hose down? All those things are the fire retardant materials that you can actually have and spray. There are also. So many different resources. And then you also should have a checklist of what you do in the case of that. Step by step, what you spray down. What do? You move pillows out. You move things that are flammable. You put things in the pool, for example. Pool can't catch fire.
Right.
So you have important china or crystal or things that can go in the pool. So you try to do those things and have them ready to go so that you're not caught by surprise.
Yeah. Trying to just be as thorough as possible, and being, just trying to get ahead of it. I own a small house in Marin County in the Bay Area, and when I bought the house, the fire department comes by and they make sure you've got your defensible space, and they actually offered up quite a bit of very valuable. They're taxpayer funded, so it's part of as part of owning a home, right? You've already paid into the system, so they offer up all kinds of replacement vents. They'll replace windows, all kinds of stuff, and you can do just a little bit per year. there's a cap on it, of course, but you do a couple of windows one year, a couple of windows the next year, get a little bit more energy efficient, performance out of the home. And then as it relates to, the fire danger, again, they'll replace the vents for you. They give you credits for all this stuff. So I think that's also something that homeowners can look into. I'm not sure what it looks like here in Los Angeles, but it's money on the table, right? Where we've already paid into the system. So
You do have that. I mean, LAFD has it, Cal Fire has it. They all have resources. If you are anywhere near brush, they will inspect. They do aerial inspections. If you don't clear it, they'll clear it for you.
Indeed.
And they'll charge you. But there's a lot of resources from them on all of this. And I mean, for sure, vents. I don't know a house today that would be built with all style vents, but the new vents are all ember resistant, and in fact, at a certain temperature, they melt and shut down completely. So if you have a house that has a fire, an attic, or eaves, you definitely need to look good and protect yourself.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, anything else that you can think of that you would like to tell the audience? Any kind of closing remarks, final thoughts?
No, I think I do want anybody who's affected by the fire. I feel terrible, and this is why myself and my company are very involved in how to get resources out. I think it will be important for them to know that there is a lot of coordination happening. It's not just the LA case study group isn't alone. I brought the School of Architecture into the group. They're working together. I brought Steadfast, that's Rick Caruso's group as well. They're also working on it. The other group with the ULI is working on it. Everybody's working in tandem to have resources. So just stay informed. Check out this website if you have any question. There is an email. And eventually there will be answers for everything. We may not have them all today, but they're all coming, and the resources are there, and you can reach out, get information, and start getting involved. We really started with the architects. Now that the architects are ready to move forward, it's time for the homeowners to be able to access, and that access is there.
Indeed. Well, thank you. This has been very, very interesting conversation, Mauricio. I thank you again for coming in,
Thank you for inviting me.
we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you so much.